Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. It's barely 10 a.m. and it's already been a very busy morning for me. So today will be our last session for season. So I'll take a break, or we all take a break from meditation class. Probably come back either October or November, probably once the new shrine is completed. But we will continue with our Sunday services as usual, and our Buddhism one-on-one classes on Tuesdays as usual as well. So today we'll be talking about some of the reasons why we meditate. We've spoken extensively about how to meditate, but not so much about why, other than, a few mentions here and there during the beginning of some of the classes, earlier classes, and then of course a few mentions here and there. But today we'll discuss a little bit more about why we meditate, specifically Buddhist meditation, which is what I am teaching here, is explicitly Buddhist meditation. So there are a lot of reasons why different people meditate, right? There are different, depending on what you're trying to get out of it, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But Buddhist meditation is a very disciplined practice, as I always stress. It is a very disciplined practice, and it has to be something you actively do. It's not something that's passively done during your free time, or when you're bored, or whenever you feel like it. Otherwise, you're not going to get any benefit whatsoever. Even some of the pseudo benefits or some of those side effects you would typically get from meditation. If you don't meditate regularly, then you're absolutely not going to get anything from it. So that's why I stress meditation, to have a pretty scheduled meditation practice. And I always say you don't have to be meditating for half an hour or an hour every day. You can really just do 5, 10, 15 minutes. It's really about the quality of your meditation, not about the quantity. Because at first, like anything new, or anything that you're untrained with, it's going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to take some time to get used to. But eventually, it'll be much easier. It'll be something that you kind of just naturally will go into doing after a while. But that's why we start slow, or start with smaller sessions first, right, with 10, 15 minutes. And we can go up maybe 5-minute increments every few weeks or a month or so, until you get to a point where you're at least around the 60 to 90-minute range per day. That's typically ideal. So we've discussed for almost a year now about one specific type of meditation, right? So Buddhist meditation really falls into two parts: concentration and contemplation, or samatha and vipassana. So the concentration part, which we've extensively gone through, right? We've gone through all the different breathing practices and methods. We've done chanting, we've done visualization, we've done walking. And then I briefly explained the vipassana, at least for a couple sessions. So, but mostly we've been covering the concentration aspect of meditation. But within the two branches, the samatha part, the concentration part, in Buddhist practice, most traditionally we follow the Anapanasati sutra or method, which is concentration on the breath, or concentration on breathing. And then the contemplation part, the vipassana, we typically follow the Sutta sutra or method, which is contemplation or introspection on 4 different parts. So it includes the body, the mind, the feelings, and the objects of mind. And that's something we'll cover more when we start back up again. Since we've really mostly covered the concentration part and have kind of really fully gone through all that as much as I can, there's A few more aspects to it that I would like to cover, though, first, which I haven't done during the classes, but I typically do it or explain it during our retreats, our meditation retreats. So during our meditation retreats, for example, we do chant Anapanasati Sutra, or at least part of it, which includes the 16 practices. And so during the retreat, we usually try to focus on the first 4, which is covering the in and out breathing and really just recognizing the longness of it, the shortness of it, the subtleness of it. But the main point, the outcome that we are trying to achieve for concentration is to really end up having a very concentrated, of course, session, having our breathing pretty subtle, very deep and shallow, and almost unnoticeable, right? If we meditate for quite some time and we're doing it correctly, we'll start noticing that we are barely even breathing. Our breathing becomes so subtle, so light, right, that we can't even hear or even feel our breathing. And we may be even wondering, am I even breathing? So it's kind of off-putting or scary as that sounds. That's really the goal of the concentration, because we really have to get to a very subtle part of breathing and to be concentrated, because we really want our mind to be quite still and tranquil, because at that point then we can really move on to the second part of meditation, the vipassana, or concentration, or contemplation, or really more like introspection or insight meditation. And that's where we can kind of go higher into our practice. Because in concentration, our goal is samadhi, which is one point in concentration. That's our goal. In contemplation meditation, or vipassana, our goal is to achieve some of the dhyanas, right? So there's 4 levels of meditation, which is pretty advanced. We will probably never really cover those, because that's just too much to kind of grasp, really. It's not achievable for most people. So we'll probably cover on it just briefly, but we won't go into too much detail, because depending on your practice, depending on what you know and what you can do, because I can't tell you where you're at in your progress, only you can kind of identify that. So we won't really cover too much of that, but we will cover pretty extensively the remaining of the concentration aspect of it. So once we start up again, and probably for the remainder of the year, we'll focus mainly on the Anapanasati Sutra and the 16 practices of it. And maybe starting next year, we'll kind of go a little bit further and advance our studies in a way, and cover some of the Sutapatthana contemplation aspects of meditation. So with that said, there's a lot of benefits that come from meditation, right? So our main goal for Buddhists in our practice is to achieve that tranquil, calm stillness of the body, so that we can really go further into our practices. Because once we achieve concentration, we can really start contemplating on the teachings, right? And so from concentration, we achieve wisdom, and by wisdom we can achieve enlightenment. So there's really steps to it. It's not something that we can just sit down, close our eyes, and wander off and pretend like we're doing something, because it's definitely not that. There's a lot of steps, there's a lot of aspects, there's a lot of levels to meditation. And unlike a lot of other things and teachings within Buddhism, there's a lot of lists, right? Lists is a huge part of the practice of the teachings. But a lot of those lists don't really have to be done in order, right? There's not really a hierarchy to it. There are some lists where it is something that we have to do in order, but the majority of the lists are just lists, just to tell you a number of certain aspects or characteristics. With meditation, however, like 99% of our list in meditation practice are in our levels that we have to follow, because we really have to be able to achieve and master one practice before we can move on to the next. We can't skip or jump over them, or we can't just skip to the very end, because we're going to hurt yourself more than anything else. There's a lot of positive benefits to meditation, but there's also quite a few negatives to it too, because if you're not doing it correctly, if you're not following the correct order of practices or lists, or not following the correct methods to practice, you can really hurt yourself more than help yourself. A lot of times people come to meditation to ease their anxiety, ease their depression, ease their stress, which are positive side effects of meditation, but meditation will not 100% cure those things, right? Depression, for instance, is a disease. It's a chemical imbalance, right? So meditation can help alleviate and kind of take you away from some of the symptoms, but it's not going to completely cure depression, right? It's something we have to see professionals for, medical professionals for, and possibly even take medication. But some of the lesser things like stress or anxiety can be helped quite a bit with meditation, but it may not cure it completely, right? But those are some of the positive side effects, right? Those are the pseudo benefits of meditation. It's not something that is taught, from me at least, something that's going to help towards that specifically. I'm not here for that. I will never be sitting here teaching you how to cure anxiety or stress. So if that's your reasoning, or if that's your desire to meditate, I may not be helpful for you. There are certain places, centers, institutions that teach meditations like transcendental meditation, that they now teach in schools and in hospitals and rehabs and prisons, right? That's the kind of meditation that's typically used for, the anxiety, stressfulness kind of aspects of your life. But that's not something that I'm going to speak on or teach you about, because for Buddhists, that's not why we're meditating. So I can only teach you the Buddhist methods and ways and techniques of meditation. And so if by practicing that you kind of naturally have helped yourself ease some of the anxiety and some of that stress, then that's completely beneficial for you, right? Those are some of the side effects that you would get. But from a Buddhist perspective, and for Buddhists, we are meditating in order to clear our mind, in order to lessen the noise in our minds, right? To calm and to kind of bring stillness and tranquility and even joy to our life and to our practice. So the reason we want to still our mind or calm our mind is because a couple of weeks ago I spoke on watching our minds, right? We really have to, our lives are mostly taken over by our minds, and we're not necessarily our minds, right? Our mind is something that has grown into product because of our life situations and circumstances, right? So depending on your environment, depending on where you've grown up, who you've grown up with, how you've grown up, and your environment and your community and society and culture, if that's kind of really what's created our mindsets, right? That's really where our mind has been molded into, and our personality has been molded into. But it's also filled with a lot of ignorance and of false perceptions and thoughts and thinking and bias and judgments and jealousy and hatred and anger. So those are the things we really want to try to eliminate and see from our consciousness, our true being, and try to eliminate those aspects out of our life, because when we're judging, when we are thinking of something or bringing up a thought, some of those thoughts and perceptions are completely false, right? They're false because we've seen one aspect of the situation and we've kind of filled in the blanks for some of the other things, and we've created this mental story about something or someone, which may be true at some point, but it's probably mostly false, right? Because if you think about it, everyone that you know knows a different part inside of you, right? Because they see you during certain times. Maybe it's coworkers, so they only see you while you're working. And typically when we're working, we're supposed to be professional, right? So they see the professional side of you. Your friends may see some of the good and bad sides of you. Your family sees different sides of you. So everyone has a different side that they see of you. And so everyone has a different idea of who you are. Everyone has a different mental image of who you are and how you are, right? So which one of them is correct, right? Maybe some of them are correct, maybe some of them are false, maybe they're all right, maybe they're all wrong, we don't know. But the perceptions and ideas that we create are typically incorrect. They're typically wrong. They're typically false on some level, especially when we're judging or when we are showing some sort of signs of jealousy or hatred. We may be angry towards something or someone because maybe something happened to us in the past from them, right? Maybe they did something to us, maybe they said something to us, or maybe we saw them or heard them say something or do something. But again, it may not have been the full story. It may have been something that you may have misheard or misjudged. So there's a lot of different aspects that kind of create the stories that are in our minds, and a lot of those are incorrect. So when we are trying to meditate and observe our minds, we're really trying to separate our mind and our consciousness. So our consciousness, we can call it like our true being, right? Our Buddha nature, our true essence. We, in a way, want to separate those because we want to be able to observe the thinking that's happening, right? Because a lot of times when we're thinking, if we're meditating, for instance, and we're thinking, we're being distracted, then we may either, one, continue with the distraction and entertain that thought until it leads us to who knows where, or we may eventually recognize that we're thinking and be distracted and kind of remind ourselves to go back into our meditation. So when we recognize our thinking and our distraction, that's our consciousness saying, hey, you're just being distracted. So what we want to eventually try to do is to recognize the thinking but not stop it. Instead, we kind of want to observe it to see how our thinking works, how our mind is working, how our mind is creating these thoughts and these thinkings and the perceptions, and really kind of basically follow it, because we want to see, what are we saying? How are we thinking? Because we may come to a conclusion, we may come to realizations that, oh wow, I think like that, or that's how I think about this person or feel about this person or situation, and we may surprise ourselves. Because a lot of our thinking, a lot of our feelings and perceptions are pretty subtle, right? And they're pretty habitual too. Because if we've grown up with either conservative parents or friends and family or a community that's racist or whatever, right? so much of that will eventually kind of be ingrained in our minds. So when we go out on our own and we do things, we live our lives, part of that is still in our mind. And so when we see people or different people, different situations, we have those ingrained bad thinking, bad perceptions, bad ideas, judgments, and biases against those people or places, and we will naturally apply it to our new situation. So that unfortunately causes the continuation of bad thinking. That continues the generational habit of racism and everything else in the world, right? So one way to observe that within ourselves is to watch our thinking, is to watch our minds. And it's not as easy as it sounds, unfortunately, but it's something that we can do, maybe for very short moments in time or very subtly, but we can get to a point where, or we can and we do want to get to a point where we can really just let our mind think, but at the same time observe our thinking and observe how our habit thinking works and kind of goes through situations and circumstances. Because it's only then where we can really kind of sit back and watch how things are happening in our minds and really observe some of our false thinking and delusions of people and places and things, and really come to a realization of, wow, I'm thinking like this, or wow, I'm feeling like this, or I'm reacting like this to this person or to this situation. And from there, it'll hopefully direct us to what's causing that wrong thinking or feeling. And from there, we can either work on eliminating it from our life or lessening it out of our life, or kind of basically weeding it out to eventually just get rid of it. But that's really one of the bigger reasons of why we meditate, is to be able to calm our minds, right? We want to be able to concentrate our mind, to calm it, to observe it, and then to get it to a point of stillness and tranquility where we can kind of go on to more advanced practices of contemplation, of introspection, and developing that wisdom that's necessary for us to achieve any sort of realization or state of realization or enlightenment. So I'm looking at the time because I want to say more, but at the same time I don't want to say more. But we also have to. It's also good to mentally dedicate why we're meditating too, right? Because we want to have a goal in a way, right? We want to have a purpose of meditation. So it is important to kind of mentally note why we're meditating, what we're trying to achieve, what we want to do, what we want to gain from our meditation. And hopefully it's good things, right? Hopefully it's to calm the mind, to lessen the thinking, to really be able to observe our reactions toward things. Because we are reactive beings, right? Humans are very reactive. We tend to react to things before we're able to really think about it or think through it first, right? It's kind of similar to the fight or flight situation, right? You're either gonna fight back or you're gonna run away. And it's kind of the same thing when it's really the same thing in anything we do, right? Especially when we react to things emotionally. A lot of things can instantly cause us to be angry or frustrated, right? Sometimes it's things that kind of build up to the anger, to the frustration. Or it could be something that's kind of happens on and off, or whatever it may be, right? Regardless of how something happens, we really do want to get to a point of being able to stop, to take some deep breaths, and to really intellectually really think through the situation first, to be able to kind of be mindful of what's going on, be mindful of what's being said, what's being done, how we're thinking, how we are feeling and reacting before we actually do anything about it. Because if we do it that way, our reactions may be simpler to handle. Because if we do it that way, we can, instead of instantly punching someone in the face or whatever else, right? We can really kind of think about what's going on. Why do I feel like I want to punch this person in the face? Why do I feel the need to do it? And what would happen if I did do it or didn't do it, right? Because if you're doing something that's like punching someone in the face or anything else that may cause something to legally happen to you, right? To whether you get arrested or get sued or whatever, really have to also be thinking about the consequences, right? And that's something we almost never really think about when we're reacting to something. So whether it's something we're saying or we're doing it because we're in the heat of the moment, right? So we're reacting to it accordingly to what's going on or how we're feeling. So when we react with negativity or with hostility, and we're not thinking about it, we may punch one or two or multiple people in the faces or do something that's illegal, and we're not really thinking about the consequences. We're not really thinking what's going to happen next. We're not thinking that we may be going to jail, that we may be getting sued. You're not thinking that either yourself or people that's with you may get hurt. We're not really thinking about those things, right? Because we're too hung up on what has happened and how we're feeling, and we're reacting to it automatically without really thinking about it first. So when we meditate and we work toward our concentration and we work toward being more mindful of our thinking, it will help us kind of slow down to certain situations and really help us think through what's going on, really help us to observe and be aware of what's happening, what's being said, what we're thinking, and how we're reacting. And when we're able to do that fully with complete awareness, then our reaction may be different, right? Instead of punching someone in the face, we may react with words instead. So whether they're nice words or bad words or good words, we may use words versus being physically abusive or something, right? So you're less likely to be put in jail by saying words versus punching multiple people in the faces, right? So even though we may be saying bad words, right, it's still a lesser consequence than punching someone in the face. But if we're able to be more aware and more observant and more mindful, then we may say compassionate words instead, or words of comfort instead, right? So it's not as bad. We won't react as with complete hostility or negativity. We can really look at the situation a little bit more carefully, more closely, and hopefully react with comfort and compassion instead. Because there's no way you can fight negativity with negativity. You can only fight negativity with positivity. You can't fight hatred with hatred, right? You have to use love. You have to use compassion in order to fight and get rid of negativity and hatred. But unfortunately, the majority of the time, we're not thinking like that. We're not reacting like that. We're not actually doing it. We may subconsciously and subtly know that we can't fight anger with anger or hatred with hatred, but as we've seen now in our world, there's so much of it that we're just reacting with more hatred, with more discrimination, with more hostility, and it's not getting us anywhere, right? So we really have to be mindful of what's going on, not just externally, but really mostly internally, mostly within our own mind, because that's where everything happens, right? You can't change the world outside of you unless you change your own inner world first. Because if you haven't changed your own mind, if you haven't gotten rid of the ignorance and greed and anger within you, and you're still doing that externally in your life, and you're causing more anger and hatred outside of you, then you're causing other people to continue the hatred and anger with them, and then they're continuing. It's just creating this domino effect. But if we're able to really control and kind of reprogram our mind and eliminate the greed, anger, and hatred, and instead react with compassion, generosity, and equanimity, then when we do that in the world, then that will cause others to see your action and really have their own reaction, one positive reaction, and continue it, right? And continue that positive domino effect versus the negative domino effect. So we really can't expect the world outside of us to change if our own inner world is just as bad, right? So that's why we really have to work on ourselves. We really have to work on our own mind and work on how we are thinking, how we are reacting, how we are feeling. Because without that change, then you can protest, you can vote, you can do as much as you want outside of the world. It's never going to change if your own mindset has not been changed first. So I will stop with that so that we can meditate together. I know it's been a while since we've meditated together. So we will do that. We'll just meditate for about 20 minutes this time. And then hopefully when we come back, I expect the temple to be closed mostly for in-person activities, probably for the remainder of the year. We will be celebrating Ulaanbaatar next Sunday, August 30th at 10 a.m. virtually. So please join us next Sunday for that, which means next Sunday we will not have regular Sunday service, since we'll be having the celebration of Ulaanbaatar, which is virtual. And then the only other potential in-person celebration we will do would probably be the inauguration ceremony for the new shrine, for the new temple. But besides that, I think for the remainder of the year, we will probably still be closed. So hopefully by the new year, we will reopen again so that we can come back and practice together. It's been some time. I know a lot of people have missed each other, and I definitely missed the company of our members and guests. So we're hoping, as long as people start following rules and do what they're supposed to be doing, to lessen the spread of COVID, then we will eventually be okay. But let's go ahead and meditate together here for 20 minutes. Welcome back. Alright, it's raining over here, so the sound of the rain outside and the light thunder is very calming. It's one of my favorite sounds to meditate to. And whenever there's a storm, I always try to make some time or a reason to be near the sound by the window or by the door to meditate. To me, it's very calming. Alright, so that will conclude our last session for this series. As usual, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section or send us an email. And I'll be more than happy to reply back. I usually get to everyone's questions, usually within a day or two. Otherwise, do continue meditation practice, to continue to make some time out of your schedule for some meditation, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Just keep it regular and consistent. That way you can actually benefit and continue advancing your practice. So since we'll be on our last meditation session for now, do join us, of course, every Sunday for our Sunday service at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. For our Sunday services, we haven't been doing any meditation during it, so it's just Dharma talk and then chanting. And then we also have our classes on Tuesdays with Alex, one of our senior members, at 7 p.m. Central Time. Otherwise, our temple, as I said, is still closed. The shrine area, at least, is still closed. But you can definitely come and join in on the park. The park is still open. The garden area is still open. So if you'd like to visit, walk through the garden or meditate in the garden, that is still open. It's just a shrine that's closed for now. So thank you all for joining me this morning. I hope you have a great weekend. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.